Welcome to The Hidden Self. My name's Chris and this is the fourth instalment in our Mary's Story video series. Today we're going to talk about relationships and specifically Mary's relationship. And if you remember a couple of videos back, with Mary she found herself in a couple of relationships that became abusive. So today we're going to talk about that phenomena, about how is it that we can create within ourselves a self-image or a sense of self that is so worthless that we see ourselves as useless. And by having that self-image, we then become vulnerable to being used or abused. And that was the case with Mary. Now, what is the purpose of a relationship? Now, if I ask 100 people that question, I'm going to get 100 different replies because each of us will see something different in a partner. Each of us will value something differently from each other. Some of us might value aesthetics over the internal self. For some of us, the internal self, the personality, is more important than the aesthetics. Whatever it is going to be different for each of us, and there's no right or wrong there. Now, for Mary, she saw the capability for someone to protect her as the highest value she could have. And that protection was from her step-parents, from her past. Now, if you think about that, that value is kind of worthless because she can never be protected or feel secure until she changes some of her memory of the past. And the problem was that she placed so much value on that protection, she started giving up her sense of self. And as the kind of goalposts moved constantly within her relationships, she became a servant to that relationship. There's a concept between value and usefulness or worth that actually doesn't correlate. What do I mean by that is that we might place an enormous amount of value on things that actually are kind of useless to us. So I might buy a Mercedes over a Kia. The Mercedes might cost $100,000 and the Kia might cost $20,000. But essentially, their usefulness is transportation. But I might get a certain feeling about going into a Mercedes, driving a Mercedes, because it might give me a sense of status. But at the end of the day, that status starts to wane. And it's really my sense of worth that actually provides me greater meaning in my life. And it's where we have kind of values that don't generate a sense of worth that we start to have self-esteem issues. So worth, though, is the usefulness of what I do. If I go and cook at a homeless shelter 50 meals a night, every night for a month, let's say, the sense of worth that I get from that service increases my sense of self. And yet I haven't been paid a cent. Yet I think all of us are in this trap about thinking that, something that we value externally, some material thing or something, a bigger house, a bigger car, and there's nothing wrong with that. We live in a materialistic world, in a commercial world. But we need to understand that not everything that we value is going to satisfy our sense of fulfillment or our sense of worth. And in some cases, we start developing values that make us feel worthless. And in the case of Mary, that's exactly what was happening. And so I try to get her to look at her value system in a way that was actually hurting her as opposed to helping her. And what I wanted her to start to see in herself was that she could actually be useful in another way. And that she ended up doing some volunteer work at the animal shelter that gave her an increased sense of worth that then lifted her sense of identity to a point that she said, yeah, her life matters. And that she saw herself as a better person for giving, so she could give herself an improvement on how she saw herself. And in fact, this subject has created so much interest. What we're actually going to do is create a long-form podcast to talk about this phenomena between what we value versus what worth it gives us, and maybe start to change some of the concepts that we have around what value does versus what usefulness we can actually be in the outside world to actually increase our sense of worth that we have about ourselves. I hope you can join us for that. Thank you.